Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Okay, I think most everybody knows me, but just in case, my name is Scott Lee. I'm a police captain with the city of Daytona Beach, and I oversee neighborhood services. And neighborhood services in our police department is a unit that's, or a division that's a combination of law enforcement and civilians. And on the civilian side, we have code enforcement and we have the rental program. And that's really what we're here to talk about tonight. We'll cover some of what the Primordial Policing Unit does at the end as well. But that's the other side of it. The other side is the law enforcement side, which is our Primordial Policing Unit, and Officer Lamp back there is our code liaison officer. And they handle the law enforcement function for neighborhood services. And what we found is it's a pretty good pairing. We're able to rather effectively address certain issues that have been plaguing some of the neighborhoods. We've had a lot of success during 2020 dealing with the houses and stuff that just had irresponsible ownership, or sometimes it's just landlords that were renting to a tenant that was managing the property irresponsibly, letting a lot of people live in there, a lot of drug usage, a lot of stolen property, things like that. But I'll pivot away from that, and we'll just jump right into what we're really here to talk about, which is code enforcement, and then some of the rental stuff as well. I don't see any elected officials with us tonight. I don't think I see any, right? Okay. I'll introduce the staff kind of as we go, but I just want to say that we have June Barnes right here. Raise your hand, June, if you would. June is my administrative assistant. She is one of the backbones to the program. She allows us to be able to get a lot of stuff done by kind of managing the background, the stuff that nobody ever really sees. Making sure agendas are done right, things are getting done into the commission when necessary, and following up on our other stuff, our orders and things that happen in the background. And then Danielle, if you raise your hand over there. Danielle is over here too, and she's our office coordinator, and her primary role is that she works in the lobby at 125 South Palmetto, which is where our office is. And she's the person that you would interact with when you come there to the lobby, and she would help you with whatever you need help with. And she gets you routed to the right people and gets you the information that you need. She's also the person that answers the phone if you call 386-271-CODE, which is a code hotline. And that's who you would talk to if you do call that. And she's also, on top of that, any complaints you put in through the portal, she's the person that transfers them from the website over to the code inspectors when they get assigned out. Did I miss anybody? Besides the rest of you guys yet, but I'll get to that in a minute. All right, go ahead, June. So Denzel's not with us tonight. He is, it's his birthday, and I let him have it off so that he could go hang out with his family. So I thought he deserved that. He works hard. So, but Denzel is the neighborhood services manager. He has 35 years in public service. 31 of those are with the city of Daytona Beach. Prior to that, he served in the military, and he did 2 years in the National Guard. And 14 of those years with the city have been with code enforcement. He's a very seasoned manager. He knows a lot about code enforcement. I rely on him pretty heavily for his expertise and his knowledge in the field. You can see by his training and his background, he has a BA in business administration, and he has all 4 FACE, which is the Florida Association of Code Enforcement certifications. And he's also a code enforcement professional. He has code enforcement professional certification. And he oversees both the rental and the code enforcement program. You can go to the next slide. So our field supervisor is Mark Jones. Mark Jones, if you just raise your hand and let everybody know. That's Mark Jones over here. He oversees our general code enforcement team. So that's the folks that are assigned out to areas of responsibility for code enforcement. And we'll get to all of them as we go through. But Mark has 6 years in public service. 2 of those years were with Volusia County. He was a building compliance officer and a building inspector. And he's had 4 years with the city of Daytona Beach. He's state certified as a building contractor, a home inspector, building inspector, and plans examiner. And he has 3 of the FACE certifications. And again, this is another integral part of the team because he has a lot of experience when it comes to building that we rely on, it allows us to be able to work through problems without having to rely on the building department as much as well. So, next up. So this is our slide where we talk about Daytona Beach. You probably can't see it. I'll run through it real quick. But Daytona Beach covers 58.41 square miles of land area. It has about, and we need to update this probably when the census numbers come out, but the last census that we had was 68,866 in population. The population per square mile is 1,044. Prior to COVID, we service the county itself services about 10 million visitors a year. And I think everybody recognizes that Daytona Beach is a big draw for Volusia County. So we experience a large number of those visitors. So we have a lot of people that come through the city. A lot of people that not just experience our neighborhoods as they're visiting people that they're here to visit, but a lot of people who experience what's going on in our core and our business districts throughout the city. And those events that draw people here, like the Daytona 500, Bike Week, the truck event, the summer races and the July Festival, the July 4th Festival, and Biketoberfest. And it seems like every year there's some kind of new event that pops up that we're dealing with that draws people here as well. You can go on. So we'll jump right into the numbers. And again, I apologize if you're having a hard time seeing this. The daylight is just preventing really from it showing up on the screen here very well. If you have the PD on Facebook, the link for the announcement, the posting for the announcement today, at the bottom there would be a link for the Civic Plus for the information as well. That might make it faster. But jumping into the numbers, so for the first quarter, well, that's what we're covering here tonight. We're covering January 1 through March 31st of 2020. And during that first quarter, the code enforcement team opened a total of 896 cases, and that's citywide. And those of you who have been here before to these meetings, you're going to hear the same thing you always hear. Our top three categories are maintenance code violations, which is a variety of things that could be wrong with a house. It can range from something as simple as you need to refresh the paint, all the way to you need a roof repair. So it can be a variety of problems. The second one usually is parking, and then it's a close second, or a close third is work without a permit. And then rental inspections is there, but that's a separate program. They're in the list, and it does compete pretty regularly with up there in the categories, the high categories. Go on to the next one. So of those 800, flip back for me. I didn't know I needed to remember the number. Sorry. Of those 896 cases, go ahead. 354 were complaint driven, and 542 of them were field generated. And the graph right there, if you can see it, it shows that about 60.5 of our cases are field generated. And what that means is that those are proactive cases. Those are cases that inspectors identified in the field, either as they were routinely patrolling their areas of responsibility, or when we respond to the complaints, we also do what we call the Rule of Six, which means we respond to a complaint that somebody calls in. We also check the neighboring 5 properties. So when they leave, they've done 6 inspections. It doesn't necessarily mean that a case is started on all of those. A case would only be started if they observe a violation. So this graph, which is, again, tough to see. So what this shows here is that you can see that the red line is 2020, the gray line is 2019, and the yellow line is currently 2021. So we're on track to be over 19. There's a big jump and a spike on the 2020 line, and it was because about this time last year, Mark and June and one of our other folks that's not with us anymore, they're retired, did a project where they went and proactively tried to uncover rental properties that weren't complying with the rental ordinance. And when they did that, there was a huge spike in cases because they were opening those cases to try to get those situations back under control. We're still dealing with that. The inspectors are still following up on those cases because COVID slowed a lot of the inspection process down. So that's why you see that spike there, or part of that. Go on to the next slide, please. So during that quarter, the team closed 922 cases, and if you're thinking, how could the number be more than what we opened? It's because there's a lot of cases left over from the previous year that they're cleaning up. And one of the improvements that we've just recently made, probably within the last 6 months is when we started it, is that we're we're getting our cases dialed into kind of a rhythm where they're on a shorter time frame. We expect that people will get the notice. Anybody could get a notice. Anybody could have a problem. But what we expect is that you take timely action in that notice. And more importantly, if you have a situation that prevents you from taking timely action, is to communicate with your inspector. And when you communicate with your inspector, you and the inspector can work out a timeline that's reasonable to be able to work through a project or an improvement or whatever you're getting done on your property to correct the issue. But what we found is a lot of people are just kind of ignoring those violations, they're not communicating, or they're communicating but never really getting any work done, and we're seeing cases that lingered and lingered and lingered, sometimes for a year. So what we've done is we've kind of dialed that back in. We've asked the inspectors to start moving their cases along and closing them out, and that's why in this first quarter you see a large number of closed cases, because they've been pressing really hard to kind of clean up their reports and get those ones under control, which quite honestly is a little bit better for them. They have a shorter time frame to keep people on. They move the cases forward, which holds them accountable, because each step of the process works a little different. Some people correct it when they get the notice of violation. Well, I guess I should start by sometimes people correct it with just a friendly conversation, something small. But some people correct it at notice of violation. Quite honestly, most people do at that point. And then you get to a percentage of folks that don't correct it until they get a notice of hearing. And when they get a notice of hearing, then they correct it. Some people still don't correct it until they get in front of the magistrate or the code board. And then at that point, once they've been in that room with them, they take corrective action. And then, of course, you have the people that never take corrective action. They're never responsive, and they just ultimately get a fine. And that's kind of that's a rough kind of painting of how that process works. And each step kind of triggers some people to get their butt in gear and get things done. So that's what that's why we're trying to move through it quicker, because we're getting better traction and action that way. During that quarter, those cases that were opened and closed in the same quarter was 166. And what those are cases where people were rather quick in. They were either cases where when the inspector went out, it was unfounded, or they were cases in which the inspectors went and had a conversation with the folks or issued a notice of violation. The people quickly turned it around and corrected the issue. Usually these are minor violations that people jump right on. I would guess that there's probably, I don't know what the percentage would be, but a bunch of those will be unfounded, because we do get unfounded cases. We get things that come in that people think are code violations because they're annoying, but they're just not a violation of the code. So that's sometimes people don't understand the difference between that, and we end up engaging them whenever possible to just explain to them, what is a code violation and what isn't. Go on. And this is really the same graph we showed before on open cases, but it's for closed, and you'll see the same patterns, and it's really for the same reasons. You can go ahead. So for the year, what we're going to look at here is a chart that a table that just compares 2020 and 2021 for the same time period, just so we can see a percentage of change. We look at this internally to see, are we on track, are we down, are we up? And then we reevaluate why, because sometimes it's for reasons just like we talked about. Our cases open might be down because we're working on things like closing out older cases. And we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on those things all the time so that we're accountable to the program and keeping a kind of a pace as we move through. Because we all know, I mean, there's a ton of code work to do in the city, so we don't ever want to fall behind to the point where we look like or feel like we're just being stagnant and not working through the issues that are really out there. We won't cover every category here. You'll see that there's an 86% drop in dorm living cases. That was because in 2020 we opened a bunch of dorm living cases as it related to a variety of different things. We had some issues out on the west end of the city with college students in neighborhoods, and we had some issues with folks over in our police zone, 56 zone, which is north end of Ridgewood, with sober living houses, and those cases have been kind of working through the process, and people have either stopped that activity in many cases, but in other cases they've applied for the appropriate licenses and made those corrections to be able to do the activity that they were doing. And then, let's see, we're down 76% in junk vehicles. That's not because junk vehicles don't exist. It's because we're rerouting most of those cases to Cortland. They never really make it into the system. and they would get reported this way. And the reason why is because on the our code allows for law enforcement to be able to address most junk vehicles quicker than code enforcement. So we don't have to drag them into the code board. We can put a 10-day notice on the car. They have to correct it, and if not, we come back and tow it. He only escalates them beyond him back to code if there's instruction that would prevent the removal of the vehicle or something to that effect. Maintenance code is currently down 13%. I suspect that'll change as the year goes on. I'm gonna just let anybody, I don't usually do this in the middle of the presentation, but before we leave this slide, because there's a lot of information on it, does anybody have any questions about any of the numbers here? I know it's a little difficult to see. Okay, next slide. So the bullet points from this end are, you'll see a vacant lot line here, or row, and on that row you'll see a 1,500% increase. And that increase is because, you guys may remember from the last meeting, we've taken Inspector Garcia out of the regular code enforcement assignment, and we put him into a vacant lot assignment. And he's been also transitioning away from his cases and closing his cases. But we are actively working to try to address vacant lots because we're having a lot of problems. And we had a lot of problems in the past, and more importantly, we're getting ready for the summer. So as we move into the summer, we want to be able to rapidly address some of these vacant lots that we know we're going to have issues with once the growing season really gets going here, which is pretty much upon us. So, any questions about this slide? Our total cases were down 29% compared to last year. And part of that is, like we talked about, it's the addressment of those rental cases, because we don't keep them divided out, but the code cases and the rental cases as of right now anyways. Yes, ma'am.
So the vacant lots that you're addressing are like any of the lots on A1A that have 0 hotels on them, there's just nothing there. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that would be a vacant lot, so yeah, that would be would be part of it. What we are typically seeing in other parts of the city, and sometimes over here on Atlantic too, but what we're seeing is that before, what was being addressed was lot clearance, and lot clearance really was just about mowing the lot. But a lot of these lots, it's a lot bigger problem than just mowing the grass. What we're finding is the contractor who was doing exactly what the contract said he was supposed to do, was just mowing around, debris and trash and stuff that's there. And it was never getting, the owner was not coming back and cleaning that up. It was never getting picked up. So we're trying to revamp that program so that we're not just addressing the cutting of the grass, but also the dead trees that are falling on the property. Sometimes people dump stuff there. One lot had I think it was one over here actually, had a toilet in the middle of the lot. You didn't know it was there until the lot clearance guy came through and cut it, and then there's a toilet like right in the middle of the lot. And it's stuff like that. We want to make sure those things are getting cleaned up. We're trying to build, or we're looking to build, as we go forward here, an abatement program with a better contract that would allow for that stuff to be addressed, as well as not just coming in with a mower and mowing the grass real quick. We want, when they walk away from there, that the lot look clean and in the condition it should be in.
How does someone turn in a lot if they don't know the address?
Oh, so the best thing you can do, that's a good question. A lot of people, in fact, I think somebody might have asked that last time as well. The best thing you can do is if you have a neighboring property with an address, is to put that address in and put vacant lot, or actually, I'm sorry, put vacant lot, and then just in brackets put west of whatever the address is, or east of, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that usually directs us to where we need to go.
Yeah. We have one on Glenview, and there's a fence. It looks like it might be the yard of either one of these two properties, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a fence, a privacy fence, but behind it is, just some forest back there. And homeless live back there, and it's just not even maintained on the front. It's been turned in, I know, several years ago.
Can you give me this is the one we talked about, I think, last week. And Cortland was out there trying to look for that camp and could not find it yet. So what block is that in?
It's on Glenview, between Waldolive and Grandview.
Okay.
And it's kind of, you'd almost say that it's not directly across from the backside of the home grounds. It's like that house, it's the next one right next to it.
Okay, so Cortland's, he's taking notes in his phone, and Danielle's also taking notes. So we got it. We'll take a look at that one. I was about to send an email back to the other neighborhood group asking where was that. Could somebody clarify where that lot is? So that helps. Thank you. Go ahead. This is. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John. You go ahead.
State or city-owned property?
State or city-owned property?
City owns a property on Oak Ridge,
If-
and then they own.
Yeah, but I should clarify, we're getting a little spun out on questions. There will be time for questions at the end of each district, but the answer to your question is if it's a parcel, it's still, it can still be reported to us. We just we don't engage the enforcement process without communicating with that department or that entity first.
Okay, and then the other one is the end of Seabreeze, the park with
The boat ramp.
It's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
And the homeless are taking advantage.
Yes, Cortland and Public Works are working on it. In fact, I think the update they sent to me just before this meeting was that they'll be out there tomorrow to clean that problem up. So that is on the list of things to get done. Sue, did you want to ask your question or did you want to wait? Okay, go ahead.
I noticed that there's a law, proposed law going through the state that it would no longer be available to let you guys know anonymously that,
That is correct.
do you think that's going to pass?
Well, it's pretty far along, so probably.
Yeah, so we'll have to give our name if we,
Yeah. I mean, that's the way that, I mean, well, this is the way it works, and I'm sure there's people in here that know a lot more about this than I do. But, you know, it had to pass, I think it passed the Senate already, and it's got to go to the House, and the House is working its way through right now. I suspect it will pass. At that point, it's got to get signed in as a bill, and if it gets approved and it gets in there, then we'll ask legal for their interpretation and their opinion of it. Which I'm sure that they will tell us that we'll have to make adjustments. Based on what I read, it's pretty clearly written. And once we've had that conversation, we'll make adjustments to our website to however we need to at that point. So yes. So, anybody else before we move on? Okay. Excellent. So first up is Inspector Thomas Clegg. He has 22 years of experience. 20 years of that is with the City of Daytona Beach, 14 with code enforcement, and 6 with the police and fire. Prior to that, he had 2 years of experience with the City of Daytona Beach Shores. All of that was with the fire department. Clegg has all 4 phase trainings, and he has his ICC property maintenance and housing inspector. Clegg, where are you at? Oh, there you are. Go ahead. I'm sorry. His area of responsibility is from International Speedway Boulevard to the south city limits, from the railroad tracks to the river. So he has what we refer to as like our 58 zone for law enforcement, and it's the south end of Ridgewood, basically. So it's a pretty tough little area. Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, during the first quarter of 2021, I opened up 69 cases, 39 of which were the maintenance code, 7 outside storage, and 6 of were abandoned buildings. Of the 69 cases I opened, complaint-driven where there were 38, field-generated 31, and complaint-driven was 55.1%. During the first quarter, I closed a total of 81 cases, of which 18 were open and closed in the first quarter. Maintenance code was 46 cases, 7 for no permits, 7 for outside storage. This is a
I'm sorry, Tom, 1 second. So if you haven't been here before, at the end of each inspector's numbers, we do this little thing called before and after. So they're going to talk to you about some specific cases and try to give you the background on it real quick, just so you can see kind of, these are this isn't all their cases, it's just some of the cases they picked out where they felt like they had the most impact or some good impact in the area, and they got some good results. Go ahead, Tom.
After the second month I started in 2007, I cited this gentleman here, and I've been dealing with him for 14 years on and off. So before it was finally condemned, but I had violations on him, and it was taken to the code board. And the after picture will show you that he decided that it's best to demolish it. So it's a great site at the Clark Street. A lot of it's getting cleaned up down there right now, so it's been a rough area, but it's cleaned up pretty good.
Yeah, it's a tough little road. It's just it's a small little dead end. A lot gets forgot about a lot. So appreciate you being attentive to it. Okay, next up is Inspector Mike Fitzgerald. He has 18 years of public service. All 18 of those are with the city of Daytona Beach. 3 were with the fire department and 15 are with code enforcement. So Mike has 2 of the phase trainings, 1 and 2. He also has his fire inspector 1 and 2. He has a stormwater sewer inspector, and his ICC maintenance and housing inspector. His area of responsibility for the first quarter was International Speedway Boulevard to the Seabreeze Boulevard area, from the river to the ocean. Go ahead, Mike.
During the first quarter of the year, I opened 71 cases. As you can see, maintenance code was the majority of them, then no permit, and then the other ones are pretty much equal. I field generated about 70%, and complaint-driven 29%. During the first quarter, I closed 92 cases. 10 were open and closed within the first quarter, and I closed about 63 of the maintenance code.
So next up is Inspector Kevin Yates. So he has 2 years of experience with HUD as a HUD physical needs assessor in the DC area. He has 8 years of construction project management experience in the DC area, and he's been with us for actually a little more than 1 year. He's coming up on 2, right? Yeah. And his duties and responsibilities, and he was allowed to escape this and then came back to it because he enjoyed it so much. But he has the north city limits to Seabreeze from the river to ocean. He did have a brief stint in 2020 where he flipped over to the rental program, but he missed all the people up here, so he came back. So.
All right, for the first quarter of 2021, I opened a total of 87 cases. As you'll see, it's mostly maintenance code, followed by no permits, and then the next issue, I think, is parking, and everything else is pretty low. As you'll see, it's about 62% complaint-driven and about 37% field-generated, which is normal for my area. We have very active people who really care about the area here, so they definitely let us know. I was able to close a total of 104 cases during this period. Of those 104, 21 were open and closed in the same quarter.
So before we move on to the next inspector, Kevin has also been helping out in the first quarter. You'll see as we go on, we have 3 new inspectors that just started recently during this quarter, and Kevin's been assisting with the training. Several other inspectors have also assisted with that training out in the field, but Kevin's been kind of a go-to person for them to help with the electronic side of things and some of the other technical aspects of the job. Next, we have Inspector Curtis Wiggins is up next, and he has 15 plus years as a Massey service inspector prior to coming over here with us. He's at about 5 months as a code enforcement inspector with us now. And his area of responsibility is International Speedway Boulevard to the north city limits from the river to the railroad tracks. So that's our police zone, like the zone 56, or just the north end of Ridgewood, if you're familiar with that. Go ahead, Curtis.
On the first quarter of 2021, I opened 58 cases. 48 was maintenance code, and 4 was no permit. 42 was field generated, and 16 was complaint driven. 72% was field generated, and 27.6% was complaint driven. I had a total of 19 cases that was closed, and 12 cases was open and closed in the first quarter. 13 was maintenance code.
Okay, so next up, thank you, Chris. Next up is Mark Bostwick. So Mark comes from us, from the Department of Family and Child Services. So he has 16 years with DCF prior to coming over. He was a supervisor and operations manager. He has 2 years with Mid-Florida Community Service as a facility coordinator at the Head Start program. He has 6 years at Volusia County Community Service as a facility coordinator for the Head Start program as well. His area of responsibility is back over here on the peninsula side It's East International Speedway Boulevard to the south city limits, from the river to the ocean. Go ahead, Mark.
All right, during the first quarter of 2021, I opened up 77 cases. 50 of those were maintenance code, 10 was parking, 6 was no permit, and then little stuff there. Of the 77 code cases open, 22 were complaint-driven, and 55 were field-generated. All right, I closed 80 cases, 23 were opened and closed in the first quarter of 2021. The majority of those were maintenance codes with 61, parking with 8, and no permit 6. All right, these are some cases this case right here I inherited from last year. I think it was started in August, and nothing was done about it. And when I came on board, I was able to get in touch with the owner and flip the thing, you'll see the before and after shot. Now it's pretty nice. This is another case at 1500 South Atlantic. It's on a major, highway, not a highway, but a major boulevard. And the sign, was, as you can see, empty. So I got on this case. I think Captain pointed it out to me. And we took care of this pretty quickly. And here's the after shot.
Yeah, that's definitely some improvement for the sign. I think that case is still a bit of a work in progress too, though, right, that property?
It has the parking stuff that's going before the board. Yeah. And this was 420 Wisteria. Just had a bunch of dirt and grime, beautiful property.
Yeah, this is tough to see for you guys, but yeah, there's a lot of dirt and grime along the top area here, but you can see it's a well-maintained property. It's pretty area.
Once they took care of the dirt and grime, it looks fabulous. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So, Danny, like we talked about, he's been transitioning. So Inspector Danny Garcia, he has 27 years with public service, 19 of those were with the city of Daytona Beach, 15 years with code enforcement, and 4 years are with parking enforcement. Prior to that, he had 8 years of experience with the city of New York. 5 of those were with as a sanitation inspector or enforcement inspector, and 2 years were with the health hospital. 1 year is with the police department. He has Phase 1 certification, a stormwater sewer inspector certification, and his area of responsibility, it's a bit of a double. It's the same area we described before with Inspector Wiggins, because that's who's taking over that role for him. It's International Speedway Boulevard to the north city limits, from the river to the railroad tracks. Go ahead, Danny.
Okay, during the first quarter of 2021, I opened 45 cases. The majority of those cases were maintenance code, vacant lots 13. Next slide. And of the 45 code cases opened, complaint-driven was 20, and field-generated was 25. Next slide. Okay, closed a total of 60 cases, and 8 cases were opened and closed in the first quarter. Again, maintenance code was 41. There's the highest. Next slide. This is 112 Fairview Avenue, just west of the Main Street Bridge, where we had a vacant lot, a lot of overgrowth there. And as you can see on the slide on the right, it was protruding over the sidewalk. Next slide. And after citing them and having communication with the owner, got them to pretty much clean everything up. There used to be even a dead tree there. We got it removed. Next slide. 615 Cherry Street. Cherry Street, we had police they started a warrant on Cherry Street. And whenever they do that, after they're done, they call code enforcement out. And we usually do a walk on the block, and we write up everything we see. So 615 Cherry, we had this abandoned building here. Had some issues there, squatters, pretty much everything, boarded up windows, dirt grime, peeling paint, overgrowth, fence damaged. Next slide.
This was a property where it was a big nuisance for the immediate neighborhood. We've been doing a lot of work at the 600 block of Cherry Street because there's been a lot of complaints from the neighborhood there. I'm trying to improve that area for them. And this is one where you had a tenant in here who was engaged in narcotics activity, and there's actually 2 shootings in that, right there in that vicinity related to that house within a 24-hour period. And that's part of why we came down there with the building department. We reassessed the house, re-engaged the issue, and ultimately the property was condemned and those people were forced to vacate the house. At that point, once they vacated the house, then the owner was responsible for working through that condemnation process, and as they began to figure out whether they wanted to rehabilitate the home or what they wanted to do with it, they chose to, or they elected to tear the house down, and ultimately they tore the house down on their own for that one. But you can see the final result. It's a problem that was there that's not there anymore, and you know, that's an improvement for that area. Huge thank yous from some of the people in that immediate area once that was dealt with.
This is another property on Cherry Street, 631. This property actually had a little overgrowth and some dirt and grime on the exterior surface, the side of the building there, and the front porch was screened, but the screens were all torn out. Next slide. After issuing a notice, the dirt and grime was cleaned out, the grass was cut, and they chose to install a new screen. 639 Cherry Street, same thing here, dirt and grime on the front, dirt and grime all on the front exterior of the building, the seawall, the retaining wall. Next slide. And after issuing a notice, they painted, cleaned it up. Next slide. 815 North Ridgewood Avenue. They got hit pretty hard. Ridgewood Avenue had a bunch of properties that had graffitied all along the exterior, the front, rear. This is the front here, and there's on the right side, there's a rear. Some graffiti, dirt, and grime. Next slide. And this is the aftermath where they cleaned it up and pretty much painted over the whole thing. 820 North Beach Street was a property that sat on the corner. We pretty much had problems with the owner. He really couldn't afford to maintain the property. Also, it was a TV business, and the business wasn't doing good, and tend to have some issues with transients and other people he was allowing to live in there, sleep in there, and a little overgrowth. The siding was getting a little rotted, deteriorated, the back of the building.
This was another one where there's a lot of drug and alcohol abuse on property, led to the kind of deterioration of the business and the property itself, and the neighborhood, you know, was having constant problems with this. And the property ultimately, as a result of our code action, ended up changing hands to a business owner in the adjacent area who's trying to do some improvements anyways in that area. And if it hadn't been for some health issues, this probably would have been in the slideshow a lot earlier, but he finally was able to get to the point where he was able to tear the building down, and it just wasn't salvageable. So that was the end of District 2. If you're not familiar with the districts, that's the railroad tracks going east towards the ocean. So this would be the moment where we'd ask if you had any questions about that area or wanted to know about anything that we've covered here so far. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is it possible to do anything about the 4x4 rental signs? The 4 rent signs that are all over the fronts of houses up and down Peninsula?
You mean the temporary signs, like the stick signs that are in the ground?
No, they're not
or?
temporary. The ones that are on 4x4 poles and 4 foot by 4 foot signs. If you drive down Peninsula,
I'm gonna have to go by and look at it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
There might be. I mean, signage is, you know, there's rules about signage, so if it falls into one of those the rules, then we can enforce it.
And how about
they're difficult, I can tell you, if they're, I mean, in the realm of temporary signs, which these might not qualify as, they are difficult to address because it puts us from the enforcement side in a spot where we have a burden to prove that it's been there for 100 days or more. And that's kind of difficult for us to prove in court, so.
Okay, so I
mean, we could, but it would take away from all our other duties and assignments.
Okay. And then the other thing is there's a parking lot at A1A and Main Street on the northeast corner. and that trash corral is in terrible, terrible condition. Can you get them to fix it? Because you can see it from the street when you drive by,
A1A and Main Street, which
Yeah.
corner?
northeast. We're talking
Oh,
white picket
okay,
fence.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can take care of that.
Thank you.
Danielle, did you get that one? Perfect.
and the rest of it looks pretty bad too, but that's really visible from the street.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just did a pretty intense code walk down Main Street, and we realized afterwards that because we were focused on getting the information out to people after Bike Week, so they had a long period of time to make corrections, we had overlooked the 1200 block, so we do probably need to go back there and just visit it all together. Yeah, we'll take a look at it. We're very familiar with that one too. Big, yes, sir.
So this time, I knew when to ask a question.
But I'm amazed, you did great.
I was chided because I didn't ask the questions at the right time. So am I correct that Mike Fitzgerald's in charge of the boardwalk?
He was during this quarter. Actually, one of our new inspectors has taken over that area just recently.
Who is?
One of our new inspectors.
Oh, a new one.
Yeah, he'll be introduced here in a minute, and I'll.
So will you introduce him to George Anderson?
Yes.
Okay.
We are working through those cases.
Now, maybe I can't read your paper.
And I didn't get a chance to go by there today, but I was able to reach out to them and get somebody working on the fence at one point. I went by there and AAA was working on the fence.
All right.
I just haven't been back to see if it has been completed yet. Oh, okay, great. I forgot John's here. He walks there every morning, so.
And the wall is done.
Great. And the wall's done too. Awesome. That's great.
You?
Yes, sir. I'm
not
sorry.
done. Okay, so your pieces of paper say that Inspector Curtis Wiggins is International Speedway Boulevard to the North City limit, river to the railroad tracks.
Yes, sir.
And it said Danny Garcia, who used to be there, is also there.
Yeah, I covered that in the presentation.
What's that?
I covered that in the presentation when I talked to Danny. Danny's actually converting over to our vacant lot inspector. So he had some cases in that area that he was still working during this quarter, and he hasn't.
Who's Danny, you mean?
Danny Garcia, yes.
Okay, so he and I developed a report at the last meeting.
Uh-huh.
And we talked about one of my favorite places, which is Seagrave and Mason.
And I took Curtis there.
I'm sorry?
I took Curtis right to the location with the field supervisor, Mark Jones, and we visited your spot
Anyone
there.
that didn't know I was going to mention that,
Yeah,
So
they have cases on it. They're working on it.
are we doing anything with Seagrave and Mason?
We are working on it. The car dealership there, or not, I'm sorry, not the car dealership, the mechanic shop there has some issues that they need to resolve that are being cited, and I think they've probably already been cited. I hear you. And sometimes when people,
It was before you were born, when Tom Taylor was the county manager. And he would always say, we're working on that.
yeah, I hear you. Well, here's the beautiful thing about what's happening right now. Because you brought it up, Danielle wrote it down. And because Danielle wrote it down, we're going to have to get you an answer for it. So, that's what we do here. We try to make ourselves accountable. We're very busy and some things slip through the cracks, but, okay. I'm going to get you an answer before that. Just like the Americano I noticed you didn't ask about because I gave you the paper.
You said the Americano was too hard.
No, I look at the front of your paperwork. It has the notice of violation that they received, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, while you're looking at the vacant lot that's on Glenview, right there by Lollipops, the vacant lot that is right next to the Wachovia, is it Wachovia Bank?
No, it's Wells Fargo now,
Okay,
but
the
I know what
Wells-
you're talking about.
Yeah, that lot needs to be looked at.
Well, we'll look at it again. When we did our inspection of Seabreeze, we did inspect that lot, and at that time, it's an undeveloped vacant lot, so it's not gonna look like
I'm not talking about
Yeah.
that, I'm talking about the grass growing on the sidewalks.
Yeah, we'll check that.
Over that, and all the trash that's always in that lot.
yeah, that stuff we can address.
That's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of that may occur here over the growing season too, so anytime that pops up, you just report those things to us and we'll take care of it. Because vacant lots do change as the weather changes. So, yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, Captain Lee, can you clarify the update on 925 North Peninsula?
I don't have a complete update yet. I was planning on responding back to the Beachside Neighborhood Watch. Sorry, it's not Beachside Neighborhood, it's the Seabreeze Neighborhood Watch that brought it up. I think both of them brought it up, actually, with an update. But what we did do is when we inspected it afterwards, we ran into a maintenance crew that was working there, and we got contact information for the crew that's managing the property or taking care of the property. They don't have the ability to make the repairs. We also engaged the building department in a conversation about the condition of the house, and they told us they condemned it. I don't know if it's gotten posted yet. So it did. Okay. Yeah, that just happened here in the last, I think, 24 hours or so. So it's condemned. That doesn't mean it's going to be torn down necessarily. That just means the condemnation process has started. But the good thing about that is that there's a time frame attached to that, so it's got to work through the process now. And if it doesn't, then it could ultimately be torn down, and those the cost of tearing it down can be levied against, or can be recorded against the property, and ultimately sent over to the tax appraisers for collection during the tax bill payment. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, John's got one. I thought I was going to get away.
Yeah, well, the bridge, Mason?
Seabreeze Bridge?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The walkways over back and forth,
Uh-huh.
who cleans them? Leads them?
It's a good question.
Get rid of the sleeping people?
It's a good question. The state says they don't, and the city says we don't, so we're figuring that out. But somebody needs to, right? I'm right there with you. Thanks, Big. All right, we ready? All right. So moving on to District 1. So District 1 is from the railroad tracks going west to the city limits. Our first inspector that's up is Roosevelt Butler. He has 21 years of public service. 20 of those years were with the juvenile correction system. 16 of those years as a captain and 2 as a major. He's been with us. You're over 1 year now too. So we haven't written down his 1 year, but he's a little over 1 year. He's creeping up on 2. So he has a BA in social science, hospitality, and psychology. His area of responsibility is a rather big one. It is Mason to the north city limits, Clyde Morris to the railroad tracks. Yeah, technically. Sorry. International Speedway Boulevard to the north city limits, and 95 to Clyde Morris. You can see that it's that northwestern region of the city. Yeah, he really does. There's a lot of open area in there too, but there's a lot of residential neighborhoods in there too. And quite honestly, if I could divide it in half and have another inspector, I'd love to do that. Because it does need some work in there, and he works diligently and hard, but can't cover everything as he works through it. So, what'd you say? All right, go ahead, Russell, you're up. I think we might have to have a third mic just to put over by Big.
Good afternoon, everyone. During the first quarter of 2021, I opened 81 cases. Out of the 81 cases, 58 was a maintenance code, followed by no permit, and then parking. During the first quarter of 2021, I opened 81 cases. Out of the 81 cases, 41 was complaint-driven, which is 50.6%, and the 40 was field-generated, which is 49.4%. During the first quarter, I closed 58 cases. 25 cases were open and closed in the first quarter of 2021. Out of all of those cases, 44 was maintenance code, followed by no permit. Okay, this is 1002 Alice Drive. This case took a while to get into compliance. However, the homeowner was out of state. He was sick during that time. But one of the key things in this was communication. About every week and a half, I would receive a phone call from this gentleman stating that I'm working on getting back to Daytona, and upon my return, I will get everything into compliance. Now, when a person tells me that, their word is their bond. So we will see the after effect. And as you can see, when he got back in Daytona, which in about 3 weeks, he got everything into compliance. Okay, this is 101 Indigo. This area has been a continuous problem. However, let's talk about homeless people. Most of our experience with homeless people, they cause a lot of trash and debris. That has caused a lot of issues in the city. However, in this case, the pastor of the church at Indigo, she works with the homeless people. And when I met with her, she assured me, she said, I have plenty of men here at this church, and we will get it done. And the homeless people, you will see what they did with this property next. And as you can see, they cleaned it right up. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. So next up, we have Inspector Sarah Kirk. So Sarah's been in public service for 2 years, actually a little over that, I think, now. And all that time has been with us here in code enforcement. Prior to coming to us, though, she had 8 years of property management experience and 10 years as a manager for Omni Parking. And just 20, she's been a lifetime in customer service, which is what I appreciate about her. She's a very pleasant person. I get no complaints about her. She's in a tough zone, but she works through all the issues with people, and they love her down there. So she has an associate's degree from Daytona State. She has her Phase 4 certification, and she is certified as a property maintenance and housing inspector. Her area responsibility is Bellevue Avenue to International Speedway Boulevard, from the railroad tracks to Clyde Morris. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. During the first quarter of 2021, I opened 71 cases, 47 maintenance code. Of the 71 cases I opened, 42 were field generated, 29 complaint driven. During the first quarter of 2021, I closed 74 cases. 4 of those cases were open and closed in the first quarter. And those are also maintenance code. This property is on a main thoroughfare in Midtown. It was definitely a blighted property, an eyesore for the community. It was attracting, it was a nuisance attracting transient squatters. Since I had the case, it was demolished, so now the land is cleared, and hopefully new development will come to Midtown in that area. This is also on main thoroughfare, South Martin Luther King Boulevard. This house also was attracting transient squatters, which with the help of PD, they were removed. You see the tarped roof and many other code violations.
We've been seeing this trend too. We've been running across properties that have either been passed from one family member to another as somebody passes away. The properties or the owners that would have inherited it don't live in the area. They don't really check on it. And what happens is we're seeing a lot of people kind of like squatting in these houses and kind of taking them over as their own. It creates some problems along the way. Those properties are hard to deal with anyways because there's usually a probate process they need to go through before they can really do anything to repair the house. But like Sarah mentioned, we just partner together, law enforcement, code enforcement, and solve those problems. Portland's pretty integral in those. He's usually the first contact for those problems.
You can see the improvement that has been made at this property, and the transient squatters have been removed. There's still a little bit of work that needs to be done, but they are working hard on this property, as you can see.
So next up is John Stenson. John's been in public service for 27 years. 13 of those years have been with the City of Daytona Beach, all 13 with code enforcement. Prior to working for us, he did 14 years with the U.S. Army. He has Phase 1 and Phase 2 certifications, and his area of responsibility is Bellevue Avenue to South City limits, from the railroad tracks to Clyde, and International Speedway to South City limits from I-95 to Clyde Morris Boulevard.
Good evening. For the first quarter of 2021, I opened 104 cases. The majority of those cases were maintenance code, and close second was parking violations.
And John, I think, is the high achiever for the month or for the quarter. So thank you, sir. Appreciate your hard work.
Of the 104 cases opened, 28 were complaint-driven, 76 were field-generated. Obviously, I'm doing a lot more field-generated than the complaints. but I got to get out ahead of them. For this quarter, I closed 74 cases. 21 of those cases were open and closed in the first quarter of 2021. As you can see, still the maintenance code and the parking issues are still running high, and the permits are coming up as well.
I'm starting to think parking's your pet peeve. Because every time I move you to somewhere, or you go somewhere else, the parking goes up in that area. That's good, though. Somebody's got to be addressing it.
It is. That's one of them.
Okay, next up is one of our new inspectors, Clairvin's John Baptiste. He just goes by JB, and I think he prefers that, right, JB? Yeah, so, and I appreciate that because it's a lot simpler. So, he has 11 years in public service. He has a prior experience from an agency in South Florida. Some of that time was as a parking enforcement officer, but he also was a code enforcement officer. He was a zoning inspector, rental and commercial inspector, an environmental and hazmat inspector, and an airport inspector. He has quite a bit of experience, and he has all 4 phase trainings, so he has a high degree of training as well in the field. And his area of responsibility, which is the question you were asking before, will be the East International Speedway Boulevard to Seabreeze Boulevard, and from the river to the ocean. His area for the first quarter, though, was, I can't even remember the area borders, but it was the area between roughly Mason and ISB, from the railroad tracks to, I believe, Clyde Morris. So, he was assisting in cleaning up some cases for an inspector that's no longer with us.
All right. Greetings, folks. Once again, JB. During my first quarter here, opened up 65 cases, and as you can see, it's pretty much chopped up very well. Most cases were under the maintenance code umbrella. That's just a general code that attacks really just about everything, and it makes sure that we get thorough compliance. So as you can see there, these are the numbers. During this time, 41% was complaint driven, and field generated was about 58%. Field generated is what I like to do, so now you're gonna see me a lot as I drive around. Feel free to stop me, we'll chat. We won't chat for long, because I got work to do, but I'll be able to give you a listening ear. I closed 27 cases, 10 were open and closed in the first quarter of 2021. And then once again, it's maintenance code, junk vehicle, as you can see there.
So that was the last inspector for District 1. There's a zone we didn't discuss, which is the zone going west of International I-95. The reason why is that the numbers for that zone are within the inspector's numbers that they discussed today, even if their cases were out there. That zone is vacant. The amount of cases that we work in that area are very low in comparison to other areas, and we just spot that area. So when an issue comes up that we need to address, we go out there. Part of that's because that area has a high amount of homeowners associations, and most of the time those complaints are addressed by the homeowners association before they ever even get to our level. But the homeowners associations do reach out to us occasionally because they have issues that are persistent or rental issues that have to be addressed, and those are addressed through our rental program as needed. Any questions about District 1 before we just cover the last couple parts of this? Nobody ever has any questions about District 1. Is it because we just get them all out of the way during District 2, or is it because we're doing the meetings in District 2? That's probably why. We need to bounce, like you talked about in June, to a different area of the city. I hope everybody still comes, though, even if we move it. So we just want to talk about the rental program a little bit. Our rental inspectors are here. We'll talk about them here as we go on. But this is just a comparison of rental inspections and occupancy license violations from 2018, 19, 20, and 21. Now these are, you can see there's a pretty good uptick and then a drop off. Part of that's because we have been struggling the first quarter here to just clean up cases from 2020 because there was a period of time last year where we could not do interior inspections for the rental program. And we're still running into problems where folks are either worried about COVID or they have COVID and we have to cancel or reschedule inspections. and wait for those issues to pass by. Of course, there's some issues in there where people are just kind of playing that to their advantage, and we work through those and try to hold people accountable as best we can while being reasonable also. So that's part of why the numbers are down right now. So first up for our rental program, and the numbers are going to look a little different here because they have one role. Oh, I know what I was going to cover. Those numbers that we just showed you, the other part that doesn't get on the slide here for you is that our rental team have a lot of customers that are actually legitimately working through the rental process that never even show up here in this data. So the folks that actually come in and they apply for their license and they go through the review process to get their license and go through the inspection process, that's all work they still have to do. They all go out and do all those inspections and they take care of those people who are lawfully working their way through the system. These cases that you're seeing here, these were just the folks that were refusing to comply with the system. And we also believe that that number is probably going to probably slowly trickle up from there, but it's not going to go up as high because we've had a lot of pressure to make sure people know about the ordinance and that they're coming into compliance with the ordinance. So we're hoping that that number will stay low at some point here because people are just working through the system like they're supposed to. Go ahead, next slide there. So up first for the rental side is Stephen Cole. He's inspector with us. He's got 14 years in public service, 10 years with utility, 2 years with animal control, and 2 years with code enforcement. Transplant from Virginia, right?
Lynchburg, Virginia.
Yeah, so he comes with a lot of experience from another state, valuable member of the team. He's jumped right in. Just like all our new folks, they've jumped right in. They've been kind of thrown in the deep end, and they're all swimming great. So he was working with the city before he came over to us in utilities, right?
Lift station mechanic, yeah.
Yeah, so he's over here with us now. He has his international property maintenance and housing inspector certification. His area of responsibility is for long-term rentals, and you're the north, right? So we split the city at international at ISB, and he handles all the rentals north of ISB. Kevin has still been helping us out on the peninsula side a little bit over here, but for the most part, all that's Steve's responsibility. Go ahead, Steve.
During the first quarter of 2021, I opened 18 rental inspection cases. 44% were field generated and 55% were complaint driven. During the first quarter of 2021, I've closed 19 cases. 2 cases were opened and closed in the first quarter.
I told you guys the wrong line that divides it north and south. It's actually George Ingram or Dunn or Fairview or Main Street. They're all the same road. So, yeah, sorry about that. We cover everything there?
I think so.
Yeah, and quite honestly, like I was saying, it's not a true depiction. We're working on how to best present their information to you because there is so much work that they're doing for the folks that are just coming in through the process. And most of the time when they inspect their inspection, it takes a long time. They got to go inside the building, got to look at several things, and they have to repeat that inspection often because people don't look at the list of what needs to be done before they call us, and they don't get it done. So we come out and have to fail them, give them more time to fix it, and then work through that process. So if we could just get people to look at the list of what needs to be done before they call us, man, it would be a well-oiled machine. We'd just be getting customers right through there. So up next is Inspector LaWanda Domingo. She has 6 years experience as a property inspector for a mortgage company, and she has 3 years experience as an inspector and quality control specialist for an insurance and risk management company. And LaWanda's been with us just over a year now, so we got to add that to the slide. Her training is that she's an accredited claims adjuster from University of Central Florida. And she has a FL license, was it 620 all lines insurance adjuster, and a Aspen Grove inspector certification. Her area of responsibility is for long-term rentals, and her long-term rental area is the south side. So she's from that same borderline, Dunn, all the way south of the city limits. Go ahead.
Okay, during the first quarter of 2021, I opened 41 rental cases. Of those 41 cases, 16 were complaint driven and 25 were field generated. During the first quarter of 2021, I was able to close 68 cases 11 of those cases were opened and closed during the first quarter of 2021.
So, Lawanda also, so she had 5 like anomaly ones in there that were parking as probably from the events, right? Yeah, so she assists routinely, all of them do. They sign up to work the special events, so when the truck event's going on, or when Bike Week's going on, and Biketoberfest, they're out here addressing issues. And a lot of that is addressing the neighborhood complaints that you deal with, people who are parking on lots they shouldn't be parking on, addressing those types of issues. And that's where those came from. Additionally, she's been helping out tremendously, cleaning up cases that have passed from an inspector that since left us, and she's just been kind of picking up the slack and filling in the gaps there. Well, we look at advertising sources. In fact, Cliff's short-term rental investigations are almost all that. But it's okay, Cliff. So her question was, how do you identify a rental when it's not, when there's already an open code case. So part of it is just kind of what you said, like we are there for another reason, and in the conversation we realize they're tenants. And the code inspectors will open up a rental case, and they'll kick it to that area inspector, and they'll follow up. The other part of it, and what we discovered last year, was we just started using data to do research. So June had got a list from the property appraiser's office for non-homesteaded properties. We eliminated commercial properties out of there and a variety of other things. And then as we went through that process, she passed some of that information on to Mark. Mark started investigating those properties. Sometimes that's just going to the property and knocking on the door. There's other ways. Sometimes we identify them through advertisement, things like that. And once we identify that, we just engage it. And there's really not people don't really refute that they're renting necessarily. Sometimes. There's a couple of people, but the overwhelming majority, they just kind of reluctantly move through the process. Very reluctantly sometimes. Okay, so next up is Inspector Cliff Reckenzone. He has 21 years of public service. 16 of those years are with the city of Daytona Beach, 6 with code enforcement, and 10 with the police department. Prior to working for us, he worked for the city of Beechwood, New Jersey. All 5 of those years that he worked with them were with the fire department. He has Phase 1 and Phase 2, and he is his international property maintenance and housing inspector. His area of responsibility is he's part of the rental team, and what his job is to address short-term rentals. So that is really his primary role. Now, when he runs through his numbers, you're probably going to see some other anomalies that pop in there. Cliff had to address dorm living last year, and he still addresses dorm living as it pops up because he has some of the expertise and worked through some of the challenges that we had as we kind of identified that issue and how to enforce it. Go ahead, Cliff.
During the first quarter of 2021, I opened 62 cases. 37 of them, the zoning cases will be the short-term rentals. Parking was 12, and maintenance comes in with 6.
Yeah, so he makes the point to say that the short-term rental cases will be the zoning cases, and that's because in our city, the way we address short-term rentals is we only address them when they're operating in areas where they're not zoned or allowed to be operating. So if they are in an area where it's allowable for them to do it, then the only thing they have to do is go and apply for the correct business tax receipt. And once they get the correct business tax receipt, they can operate their business essentially the way that they see fit, and as long as it's not causing other secondary impacts to the neighborhood, those secondary impacts will ultimately be addressed either through law enforcement or code enforcement through other issues. Sorry, back to you, Cliff.
24% was complaint-driven, 24% was complaint-driven, 75% was field-generated. 15 cases were complaint, and 47 cases were field-generated.
And I don't want to sell them short here, because a lot of people think all you do is you sit down at the computer and you log into a website, and you're like, oh, there they are. Let's just write them down, and let's all bring them into court. That's not at all what happens. Like probably 90% or more of them are not identifiable off of the website. In fact, Cliff came up with this great idea just recently this quarter. He put up his most wanted wall. We bought him a bulletin board. He puts it out in the hallway, and we stick photos on it that he found an exterior photo of the house, but he still has no idea where it is in the city. And it's worked out pretty good. There's people walk by and they're like, oh, I just went by that house the other day. It's on this street. And we started identifying them that way. The other way is that sometimes as they apply for rental licenses or as they get investigated for other code complaints, the inspectors or Cliff thinks, hey, it might be over in that area, let me come by, and we discover it, or we just kind of communicate with him about what we see if we think it matches something else we were looking at online. They're tough though, because we take it upon ourselves to make sure that if we're addressing it with a house that's actually doing it, and not just, accidentally, sending a letter to somebody who just has a dot on their house when it's not them. The real house is 4 blocks away.
I closed 64 cases during this quarter. 15 of them were dorm living, 18 were rental inspections, 17 were zoning. All of the zoning cases do go to court as irreparable irreversible.
Yes. That is, the city's position is that the use of the income derived and the impact to the neighborhood for the short-term rental is irreparable and irreversible. That's the stance we take in court. They all go directly to magistrate. We actually last year had to create a second magistrate meeting in order to be able to get all the cases through in a month. And even this, we're having troubles where they take such time to present the case that quite honestly, we may have to come up with some other way to come up with another meeting at some point. So we're toying with that idea. Before we jump into questions about the rental program, if anybody has them, I just want to, I commonly get asked this question, so I just want to cover it while we're here. So June to December of 2020, the magistrate levied fines in the amount of $141,000. $141,000, yeah, I said that right, sorry. 2021 to date is, they've levied fines in the amount of $117,620. So you can see that part of that's because last year we were working on refining our process of how to bring them to court, what to cite them for, how to present our cases, and then COVID hit and just grinded everything to a halt. Then we got back into court magistrate about July. That was the first time we started really kind of getting cases in front of them for the short-term rentals and getting some fines in place. And that's kind of why you're seeing that uptick, because it was kind of a slow crawl to where we are. The presentations are kind of becoming uniformed and standard. We know what facts to cover. We're trying to tighten up that process, and the magistrate is starting to understand the facts that can impact the circumstances on both sides of the case, so they're adjusting their fines based on that as well. And I know a lot of people here that we come in and we ask for $15,000. We do. That's our standard. We come in and we ask for a fine of $15,000. I will tell you that the magistrate weighs out what our side of facts are and the respondent side of the facts, and then the magistrate decides what that fine is. And it can range from as low as, I think we've got $120, all the way to $15,000. So we've had several that are $15,000. Usually that's because the person never showed up to court, never communicated, or continues to do the activity anyways, even after being cited. If they've taken quick action and they've taken it down and they've showed that they've resolved the problem, the magistrate usually does drop the number. We typically see fines somewhere ranging from $1,000 to $7,000, and then the circumstances based on if there was direct community impact, like a neighbor complaint or something where we have information of an impact it had on the community, that can influence the fines as well. I think I covered everything we need to talk about with the short-term rentals there. Did anybody, before we move on, did anybody have any questions about the rental program? Yes, sir.
Captain Lee, just a question about the short-term rentals. I think it showed on the slide that most short-term rental complaints are field generated. Is that true?
That is correct, yeah. So,
that's
sorry.
the opposite of what I would have thought.
Yeah, we get, it's tough because some of the ones that we get complaints about from people, that we don't find the evidence of it. It's not that it's not happening, it's that we don't find the evidence. Those do come in. I think people get a little frustrated by the fact that it's just hard to connect their information with what we're seeing. We have to have facts that we can support. We can't just rely solely on the testimony of somebody who saw it or talked to somebody at the house or things like that. And quite honestly, a lot of times, the reason why there's field generated is because during the events, we ride around and look for them. And because they're a little more identifiable when there's trailers stacked up in the yards, and you've got big trucks in the yard because it's a truck event, or the motorcycles are all in there that aren't normally in there. So that's part of why there's field generated. That'll probably be less. I would say that it won't be. We'll probably still have more field generated than we do complaint, but it might be a little closer to even in the next series of months because there's not an event in there that we would use as an identifier. Oh, I take that back. The truck event. I forgot about that.
Thanks.
Yeah, Jeep Week might show a couple too. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Last on the agenda here is the Primary Policing Unit. So for the quarter, they made 166 arrests. They wrote 210 reports. They've executed 17 search warrants. They also are responsible for checking the sex offenders. So they've conducted 57 compliance checks, and they've arrested 5 sex offenders for violations related to those compliance checks. We've continued to work on our Operation Noble Cause, which is the one that we had a separate meeting for down in Surfside Village that started off of Noble Street, right north of Speedway. It was 217 Noble, which is really 216 South Grandview. That's why we call it Noble Cause. That is the one where we've addressed the embedded problem in neighborhoods where they've over-occupying the house, they're using drugs, you're seeing overdoses, a lot of traffic in and out, stolen property in and out of the property, a lot of junk accumulating in the yards, those types of things. We've seen in the last quarter a tremendous downturn in those complaints and things that are identifiable to us when we ride around in the neighborhood. Not to say that it's gone away completely, because I have heard some reports for people seeing people riding around with multiple bikes and things like that. But at the end of the day, this trend seems to be trending down. People are starting to realize that as soon as you start having this type of activity, we identify it pretty quickly and jump on it. Part of that is because the PD overall wants to take a hard stance if we can, whenever we have an opportunity to, against overdoses. And this is one of the ways that we can kind of attack that problem at a specific location. We're working on the Seabreeze Boulevard Violent Crime and Beautification Initiative. That's a project that we've kind of off and on throughout the years worked on. Right now there's a big push and a lot of conversation about Seabreeze. The Primary Policing Unit, volunteered to work every weekend for April here so that they could better assess the area and kind of come up with some long-term plans that might be able to assist patrol so we can roll out some of that training to them. So that's what they've been working on. We don't really have any results for that one yet because that's kind of a work in progress as they go through this month. And then we've just been working on quality of life and code enforcement partnership with South Ridgewood Avenue Corridor. So some of you know that we had some dealings with a hotel down on South Ridgewood. It was actually a couple of hotels, but the one that we had to go to multiple times was down at 1011 South Ridgewood. And that was not just about that one place. We're also addressing things over on Martha. We're addressing issues in that South Ridgewood corridor because that area, what we were starting to see in this first quarter and towards the end of last year, is you're starting to see an uptick of people saying, hey, I just want to walk my kid to the bus stop without, having to be, bombarded by people trying to sell me drugs or being upset because I won't tell them what the time of the day is or whatever the case might be. I just want to be left alone, not be harassed by people, not have prostitutes out on the road, things like that. So as we've seen that community impact occurring, we're starting to, work in that area and try to address those issues to tamp them back down. Some of that's related to a variety of problems. One of them would be landlords that are probably renting to people that they need to be more accountable for. It's not that they don't necessarily need to be renting to them, but they need to make sure that they're not subleasing to like 9 other people, things like that. So, any questions about the Primary Policing Unit? Big, yes, sir. Oh, that is one of our recommendations. Yeah, we have actually already communicated with the IT department, and we've already done a site survey. We did that back in January. Sure. I could have just repeated it for you, sorry.
Why don't you put up cameras on Seabreeze?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. We're in the process of, we did a survey with IT. It wasn't just about Seabreeze, it was 600 block of Grandview, down to Glenview. We're trying to get something up there at Glenview and Atlantic as well, because many of you know we've had some problems up in that area. We're hoping that the new improvement of the hotel and the parking garage will help with some of that, but we want to stay on top of it. We want to keep it safe. So it's going to have a dollar sign attached to it. So we want to make sure we got it lined in. It's what we need. We want to be able to present that so people can make decisions about what to do with that. Yeah, and they're invaluable. I mean, there's these business districts that we have, like Seabreeze, Beach Street, Main Street, even Ocean Avenue needs more cameras. They need cameras so that we can be able to, it's like a full force multiplier for us, right? Because it allows for supervisors to be able to be addressing other things within the district while also keeping an eye on other areas. It also allows for when an active patrol officer engages something in that area and somebody either flees or runs, the other officers can engage the camera systems and be able to see where they went, where they're hiding, what the descriptions were. And it allows, what we do is we pipe those into common areas. So, for instance, the boardwalk at Breakers Park is the one that we commonly have displayed in the briefing rooms all the time. And the reason behind that is that if you're in there and you're just eating your lunch and something all of a sudden comes up on the camera, the idea is that you would at least get on the radio and tell your zone partners, hey, there's something going on at Breakers Park, there's a lady in distress, or there's a guy stealing a bag, or whatever it is, and give out a description so that we can respond to the area. The other thing is they just help solve crime. They do. I mean, what'd you say? Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying there was two things. The second thing was they just help solve crime. I mean, there's many times that we've had stuff occur. People don't realize there's city cameras there. We can get access to city footage a lot faster than trying to track down business owners. And with that city footage, we're able to jump on stuff. We've gotten a lot of things straight out to patrol. We found people blocks away from the crime within minutes. And because of that camera footage, knew it was them. Was able to address it right then. And we've solved things days later, too, from that stuff. So they're a valuable tool. They need to be in those areas where we have a lot of public. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
It may be a little early to ask, but is there any more traction on the Seabreeze substation or PD?
I just know that there's conversations going on about that. I don't know. I don't think that we really just kind of talked about that last Tuesday, right? So I don't think there's been a lot of movement in where that conversation was last Tuesday, but we are pressing forward and trying to discuss that, work through how that would work, where it would be, how that would benefit us and how it would, impact the area as well. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys for coming out, first of all. But thank you for your continued support of the code enforcement team. We need your support. We need the support of the community in order to be able to effectively address the neighborhood issues and concerns throughout the city. This is a tireless and often thankless job. These inspectors do a tremendous amount of work throughout the year and deserve to be commended for their hard work. Also, we'd like to thank Our Lady of Lourdes for partnering with us during this. So they've allowed us to have this outside venue that has allowed us to be able to bring these meetings to you and be out here with you. So thank you guys. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate your time. We are still here for a few minutes, so if you have any follow-up questions or something that you wanted to sidebar with us, please just come up and get with us. All right? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Next code stat. I almost forgot. Next code stat will be July 20th. Babe, are you paying attention? He's not. It'll be July 20th. And it's scheduled for 6:30 p.m. We tentatively have it scheduled for Bethune-Cookman University. We're hoping to use the same room we used in the past for CodeStat. We're just waiting to hear back from them, and we'll push that information out to social media and our other city PIO avenues of information. Thank you again.